Hi everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Genre Equality Podcast on the Genre Equality channel. I'm Hidzir.
Hi, Isa.
This week, this month, it's going to be a big one for you guys because we'll be covering season 4, part 2 of Attack on Titan, which is not the final part as we've learned. Too much consternation and controversy, which we'll get into later on.
Yes.
But there are other things we're going to talk about besides AOT, the big anime out there, particularly myself. Will be singing the praises of Severance,
Mhm.
one of the best new shows coming out of Apple TV Plus just last month. Just ended a few weeks ago actually, as well as a new indie film called Memoria, starring Tilda Swinton, out at the projector right now. Season 2 of Russian Doll is finally back after
Oh
a
yeah.
4-year hiatus. Bathhouse time traveling anime Thermae Romae Nova will be on the bill as well. And those are just our main topics. Plus, we'll be covering big movies that have just recently been released, such as Fantastic Beasts 3, I think.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Yep, Fantastic Beasts 3. It's called The Secrets of Dumbledore. That's out as well. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is out as well. Morbius is out as well. These things have been out for a while, and we're finally, getting around to reviewing them. Which says a lot about how excited we are to talk about them, which is not at all. Um, and those are just some of the things. Plus, in my pull list, I'll be talking about a very old book. Oh, it's 20 years old, so oldish.
Yeah.
Book called Never Let Me Go, which I've only read recently, although I have seen the film. Plus a couple of new shows that are out called The Man Who Fell to Earth and Shining Girls will be covered by me as well. Alongside Isa F, will be talking about season 2 of Ultraman, which is probably the biggest show with the biggest hiatus. Like what, 4 years ish, right?
Yeah.
Even longer, the Russian Doll.
Yeah.
Man, crazy. But we won't be talking too much about that, and Isa will tell you why. Let's begin with the biggest anime that we have to talk about right now.
Yeah.
Easily the biggest show on our rundown this month.
Yeah. Hands down.
Attack on Titan season 4, part 2 continues the story of generational trauma in the within the walls of Paradise and without. Obviously, this was billed as the final season, and we have kind of been, anticipating the finale here.
Yeah.
I myself knew that it wasn't not going to end with part 2, and had to, keep that quiet for the most part. The only thing I could tell people is that they will be dissatisfied with the finale because it's not a finale. Um, but before we get into what is or isn't the finale, or whether you are satisfied with the ending, or whether you're happy that it's continuing for 8 more episodes next year,
Yeah.
let's get into season 4, part 2, without the extra stuff, lah. Let's just take it all in a vacuum. What do you think of Attack on Titan season 4, part 2? Does it live up to the greatness that was season 4, part 1?
Oh man. I guess so. It's kind of this weird thing where I feel like the way that they've divided the parts, and I think this is gonna hold true for part 3 as well, isn't as
Mm,
neat as it could possibly be, right? Like if we
mm.
were to kind of like eventually when we're done with however many parts season 4 has, right?
Only 3 parts. There's only 8 chapters left.
Okay.
9 chapters left. So it can't be more than 8 or 9 episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, hopefully, we'll see. They might decide to drag things out, which I
There's
hope.
only one arc left. There's only one arc left. It's a very short arc. It has to finish. Yeah.
Yeah. So with part 3, I think when we take a look back at it in its entirety, it might be a little different, right? Just having all 3 parts in kind of um a kind of a macro view of that and how they decided to kind of like finish off the story in this final season. But
Mm.
with the way they divided it current now, part 1 and part 2, it did feel a lot like part 1 was kind of fresh, right? Like going on from season 3, which was a very, very strong season. And just kind of like continuing with that, the whole different kind of point of view than what we got in seasons 1 and 2. And
Mm.
continuing with that, I think that captured a lot of people's kind of imagination, also with the kind of like continuance of the time jump that we got as well.
Mm.
Right. And then like going into part 2, like part 1 felt fresh, but it also felt like a setup. Part 2 felt like a continuation, but we didn't get the satisfaction of a proper conclusion, right? So
Mm.
it's hard to gauge part 1 against part 2, in my opinion. What did you feel about part 2 via part 1?
I think part 2 is a very, very strong season. it is a bit unfortunate that they weren't very upfront with the fact that this was part two of three,
Yeah,
rather leading people to believe that part two will be the finale, lah, which is where the backlash comes from. I think if they were just upfront with it and said this was part two of three,
yeah.
this season might have been a lot more well received because I think it was very strong. It perhaps doesn't match the quality of part one,
Mm.
but once you see part three, you will come to consider part two to be greater
Mm. Yeah,
than you think of it now. Especially that particular finale, which was not the finale. We were expecting a big fight between Eren and Armin's little United Nations group and everything, right?
yeah,
But what instead we got was a low key contemplative flashback to a key moment on the recon cruise. First scouting mission beyond the walls into the continent nation of Mali,
yeah.
which seems like a bizarre choice for a finale. But what it does is it gives you character beats and character moments that are so pivotal and critical to what is happening next
Yeah.
that you will look back onto this finale very fondly.
Mm.
But of course, like I'm speaking with the knowledge of what happens next, lah.
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah.
Almost prescient vision.
Hmm.
With that, yeah. At this point in time, with where we've ended, right? Do you feel like Attack on Titan is poised to be one of the best anime this decade?
It already is for me. It's not poised or anything.
Yeah.
It's there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
whether or not like we see part three, right? Or what I mean, like it's gonna take some major kind of mishaps either with the studio or with the quality for that to like derail, right? Where Attack on Titan
Mm-hmm.
has established itself in. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you for sure.
Not necessarily. The issue with Attack on Titan season 4 part 3
Yeah.
is not the fact that the studio or whatever is gonna drop the ball. It's the fact that the final arc in the manga itself is considered to have dropped the ball. So the question is, do the animators and the anime showrunners stay true and faithful to the creators' very divisive, I would say bold and brave, yet cynical ending,
Yeah.
or do they tweak Isayama's manga to give fans a more, say, happier ending? That's about as
Uh,
much as I can say without spoiling it.
yeah, for sure.
I personally prefer the manga ending, although it is overwhelmingly. I'm in the overwhelming minority out there, of the people who read the manga and love the ending. It seems the majority think it's a terrible ending. I think the majority are just, I don't know, kind of brain dead shonen fans who just want fan service.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm not here to judge you. I mean, art is subjective. If you don't like the ending, you don't like the ending, lah. I mean, whatever, lah. I will live with that. But I personally love the ending, and I hope the anime sticks true to it. And but there will be controversy regardless.
Yeah.
Whether it sticks to the ending, which in that case, the controversy will be, for most of Attack on Titan fans, they've not read the manga,
Yeah.
right? You would say.
Yeah.
So the uproar will be amplified and multiplied to the levels of Game of Thrones ending.
Yeah.
So that will be the controversy part one if they go on that route. If they don't go that route, the people who do like the ending or the people who want them to stick to the manga then will complain, oh, you gave a happy ending, you sold out, you caved in, etc. etc. It is a loss for Attack on Titan, I feel, regardless of where they go. Lah.
Interesting.
But that is a speculation for part three, But
Yeah.
what about you? What do you think were the highs and lows of part two? What do you think of it?
Okay, so highs and lows of part two. I feel like again, where we ended off. And I think in general, I think we will keep away from spoilers because I'm not sure. I think it's recent enough that not everybody has caught up with that. So if you're listening to
Yep.
this, we are not in spoiler territory. You are safe for the moment. A couple
Mm,
of revelations like here and there. Like it's not as quick. We don't get like these quick small revelations that we got in part one. Like these are more impactful. And again, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of like character setup for that. What I'm
mm,
thoroughly enjoying for part four, the two parts of season four thus far, is the fact that it is such a rare thing for any sort of anime, rather, to have its character development and growth become the center stage, so much so that no matter how terrifying or fantastical or strange the setting and the premise of the anime is, that sits in the background, right?
Yeah.
And while it continues to drive the plot and all that, it is at this point in time like largely character driven, right? There are so many
Yep.
threads that you could possibly follow that we all want to see tied up. There are so many clashes and conflicts. There's so much reason to go back to earlier seasons just to see if each character has performed kind of like true to form, as we've
Mm.
kind of discussed with some of the foreshadowing and all of that. So all of those things I feel have become more compelling than the actual mystery, I guess, behind the show itself, right? Or what it started off with in season one.
Mm.
And that to me feels incredibly rare and incredibly well done. And it is most evident, I think, in season four, part two, than in anywhere else in the franchise so far.
Yeah, season 4 part 1 had the benefit of giving you all the twists
Yeah.
because of the time jump.
Yes.
Season 4 part sorry, that was part 1, right? Had all the benefits of the twists and everything.
Yeah.
It drops you right into that, Part 2 needs to give you the reasons for those twists. It needs to fill in
Exactly.
on the context of it. And that is just as important as giving you the twist, because twist without context is meaningless,
Yeah.
It is half of M. Night Shyamalan's filmography, right? Um, so that's why I think season 4 part 2 really succeeds, because you see the return of several characters such as Annie, who we
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen since late season 1 or early season 2, I believe.
Yeah. Early season.
We didn't see Levi at all, with the exception of the flashback finale.
Yes.
We see the growth of Gabby as our funhouse mirror reflection of year one Aaron. And then the parallels between Gabby and Sasha, the girl she killed,
Mm.
and and Gabby ending up becoming Sasha uh to a very important family that Sasha saved early on.
Yeah.
They do a lot of neat little small nuanced character moments like
Yes.
that I feel is missing in the majority of seinen or shonen anime.
Yes.
Um, I think the reaction to the latest season of Demon Slayer very clearly illustrates that there is a big divide between what I consider good storytelling and what fans of the genre consider good storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is why Attack on Titan is getting the backlash it is, because it's going in a very subversive route. It is brave in the choices that it makes. Um, there have been, indications that some people consider the enemy to be nihilist or imperialist or pro-war. A bit bizarre, this controversy,
Yeah.
considering, is Schindler's List pro-genocide? I mean, it's because it's showing genocide. I don't think so, and I think the points might be flying past your head
Yeah.
if that is the conclusion that you draw from this anime, which is so clearly about the horrors of war and about people deciding that again and again, including our main character and protagonist,
Mm-hmm.
Eren Yeager,
Mm-hmm.
that genocide is the answer to historical atrocities. Um, yeah, it's great. It's great. It's that old Battlestar Galactica adage,
Yeah.
all of it has happened before and all of it will happen again, lah. But the cost of generational trauma is that it keeps the cycles of violence churning. This is what the show is all about. It's about how difficult it is to break out of the cycles of violence.
Yeah.
And if you look at our own human history, real history, you see that we don't do that. Individual characters in a show, like individual people in real life, may make the decision to not go for vengeance or
Yes.
to be the bigger person, etc., etc. But in the end, like individuals can break out of that, but society as a whole doesn't seem to be able to, and that's what Isayama is trying to say
Mm.
with Attack on Titan. It may not be a very rosy outlook. So many of the animes out there, you have all these very noble characters always doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And Attack on Titan has very human characters who are always filled with human flaws and the human wish for vengeance and revenge, and it puts you so immersively into the shoes of every one of them, whether you are rooting for Mali or whether you're rooting for Paradis or whether you think for Eren or Mikasa or Levi or everyone, or even Zeke.
Yeah.
Everyone has a good reason for doing what they think, for doing what they're doing. Everyone thinks that they're right,
Yeah.
and to a certain extent, everyone is right, which is what makes this such one of the most complex political allegories that's ever been put on screen, live action or animated,
Yeah,
in my opinion. Yeah,
agree. I totally agree.
yeah.
Yeah. So how would you rate season 4 part 2?
It's an 8 out of 10 for me. Not I will rate season 4 part 1 a 9 out of 10, so
Mm.
this falls slightly below that,
Yeah.
but an 8 out of 10 is still a very, very strong rating and a strong season, I feel. If only they had been upfront that there was going to be a part 3,
Yeah.
then perhaps I might have rated it higher a bit,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like the almost the false advertising of it, which is
Yeah.
not the fault of the actual creative team, but the fault of the marketing team. So, but what are you gonna do? Like, it's part of the narrative,
Yeah.
the meta narrative going into Attack on Titan, as a fan. So you got to consider that as well, I feel.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm giving part 2 a 7.5. I believe I get part. I wasn't. Did I? You were the one that reviewed part 1.
No, I didn't review part 1. I wasn't into the show at that point.
Right. Oh no no. Okay, so that was on my anime list, which I don't on my anime corner, and I don't usually give a score for that. But I would give part
Mm,
1 probably like an 8.5. I think,
okay.
just because it has something to do with like the pacing of part 1 felt more satisfying. Right.
Mm,
So again, I guess once we're done with part 3, and maybe we'll kind of revisit this topic as like Attack on Titan in its entirety, as we do with
hmm.
many of our favorite kind of franchises.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if that changes when we take a fuller, more macro view of Attack on Titan as a whole.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. There was speculation that it was going to be a movie to wrap this up, which would make sense, considering the studio Mappa made so much from Jujutsu Kaisen Zero,
Oh
right? That
yeah,
they're like, oh, why don't we cash in on this? But I think the 9 chapters remaining
yeah,
would have been too much for a 2-hour film, unless it was a 4-hour film, which would be basically a Snyder cut. So I think an 8, 9, 10 episode final season would be just about the right length for the final 9 chapters.
yeah,
Especially considering season 4 part 2 was so faithful to the manga that every episode was exactly 1 chapter,
yeah.
and I think that might be doing it. That might be what they're going for in the next part lah.
I hope so. I
Yeah,
hope so. I do hope part 3 like doesn't rush it, right? Like anything less than 9 would feel a little
sure.
pushing it, because for those of you that are wondering, the manga is done, right? So if you want to go ahead and go read on that, you can have a peek into what we are referring to vaguely. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we'll see. Hopefully they take their time with it, like it gets the pacing that it deserves for this final part.
Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. There's a lot of fight scenes drawn in the final chapters
Yep,
of the manga. I'm assuming the fight scenes being animated would be considerably longer lah. There could be entire 4 5 episode arcs focused on one fight.
yep.
Which is not new for anime or not new for Attack on Titan even.
Yeah.
The entirety of season 2, 1.5 days takes place over one season.
Yep.
So I'm just telling you, part 3 will be like that lah. Yeah, yeah. I don't know how much I can say, but that's roughly what I can say lah. Other than the fact that I enjoyed part 2 a lot, I know a lot of people were disappointed that it was not the end. They skimmed on the finale. But I will tell you that would you rather have them rushed, like, or crammed in the final 9 chapters in the last 2 or 3 episodes, or would you rather have the story told at a more appropriate pace?
Yep.
Patience has its virtues. Let the animators animate the final season. Give them time to tell the story at its own pace.
Yeah.
Rather than cramming in all the chapters within the 12 episode order they got for part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, what would you rather have, like a rushed ending or a proper ending?
I mean,
So if you're upset that this wasn't the ending, think of it that way lah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I think a lot of it has to do with things that you can't control, that's outside of the anime, right? Like the way that they market it, etc., etc., or just
Mhm.
not letting that information on. But what I struggle to understand is like, look, you're getting more Attack on Titan, right? Which is an
Yeah.
anime you purportedly love. So
Mm.
why are you complaining? Right, like an additional
Sure.
season, sure, you have to wait, however many months it is that we have to wait, right? But we've lived as an entire generation through Game of Thrones, right? And like we are no stranger to that. And look at what we got at the end of the day for Game of Thrones. So that given how quality this first two parts were for this final season has been, right? Just wait a couple more months and like we'll get it in its entirety, and then you can decide whether or not, right, the ending is what it should have been, the pacing is what it should have been, whether or not you still believe that they should have ended it at part two. Like, just give it time. It's not going to be more than a year. So like, chill out.
I mean, Game of Thrones is a bit of an apples to oranges thing, like considering the Game of Thrones showrunners couldn't have waited 20, 30, 40 years or however long it would have taken for George R. R. Martin to finish his last two books,
That is
Um,
perfectly fair.
the
Yes.
Game of Thrones showrunners also had nothing to adapt for its final season or final 2 or 3 seasons.
Exactly.
Whereas Attack of Titan does, So, I mean, yeah, Game of Thrones, not to get back into that narrative,
Yeah.
but it was like Benioff and Weiss were a bit unfairly maligned
For sure.
for trying to end the story that they didn't start.
Yeah.
And it was very unfair of them to put that pressure on them, especially from George R. R. Martin's point of view, like, who should have given them something to adapt. Attack on Titan does have something to adapt.
Yes.
Its most critical decision going forward in the next year is whether to change the ending.
Yeah.
There are ways to change it, I feel, that could work, but I'd rather it not.
Interesting.
I think Isayama's view of humanity is brutal but earned,
Yes.
cynical but truthful.
Yes.
It will upset you because it reflects who we are, not who we should be.
Yes.
And I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it.
Yes. I want a cogent ending, right? With whatever like this world that he has presented and all the characters that populate it and how we have followed them, I want an ending that does justice to that and follows that. And I don't know if it's possible to have a happy ending that satisfies those requirements. But we'll see. We'll see what they choose to do from here on. And fingers crossed, they are faithful as they have been with part two.
Definitely, I definitely agree. So yeah, it was an 8 out of 10 for me. It was a 7.5 from you, right?
Yep, that's right.
All right, very, very, very high rating. Next up, I'm gonna delve into the first part of Quick Hits, where I talk about the movies and TV shows that my co-hosts have not been able to catch up on. First on, I want to talk about a show that means a great deal to me and is right up there with a show that I spoke very highly about earlier in January called Station 11. This engrossing new Apple TV show. It's a thriller called Severance. I feel rival Station 11 in terms of quality and brilliance. And spoiler alert, I will be giving it the same rating. In Severance, it stars Adam Scott, who plays Mark, a man who literally has no life outside of work. Well, half the time anyway. Let me explain. The show takes place in a world where corporate employees can volunteer for a severance procedure that completely separates their memories of their time at the office from the memories of everything else. So there are essentially two marks. The innie, who they call the people who are working innies, and the people and the personal selves outies.
Yeah.
People who exist inside and people who exist outside. The innie, who exists in and around the sub basement cubicle where Mark does some inscrutable kind of data entry. And then there's the outie, who has no clue what his body does down there for 8 hours a day. As far as the innie Mark is concerned, he never gets to go anywhere, see anyone but his colleagues, know anything about his personal life, sleep, or get any kind of break.
Yeah.
He is always working all day and every day of the strange half-life his outie has chosen for him. This show is created by Dan Erickson and directed all of his episodes by Ben Stiller. And the show literalizes the struggle for work-life balance in a way that feels equal parts Charlie Kaufman-esque sci-fi whimsy, also a bit of paranoid 70s thriller, and a lot of late-stage capitalism satire. Severance gradually reveals why the outie versions of Mark and his office mates would subject part of their identities to such a horrific fate.
Yep.
But anyone who has devoted too many hours to a job while enduring platitudes about how the company is like family may soon find themselves relating to the trapped innies, not the outies. Though Mark is the main character in both worlds, Erickson and Ben Stiller smartly use his co-worker Helly as our point of view proxy for the work scenes. We are first introduced to her. She is our first character that we meet. She wakes up lying on top of a conference room table with no memory of who she is or how she got there, and spends much of the first episode convinced, pretty justifiably, that she might be part of something nefarious.
Yeah.
In one scene, she asks if she's just livestock, grown to be someone else's food. Later, she wonders if she's died, and this bright, antiseptic, decidedly retro office space is really hell, and Mark gently insists that it is not. But within a few episodes, it becomes clear that Hallie is onto something on a metaphorical level, because
Mhm.
not just because the older co-workers treat the company itself as religion. Some study the company's manual like it's a Bible, while others who have undergone severance, aka others who have not undergone severance, the non-severed workers,
Yeah.
normal workers, all refer to the company's founders as if he was some sort of messiah. It has a very religious cult vibe to the corporate philosophy behind this company.
Mhm.
Outside of its smart and intriguing script, Ben Stiller has really grown to be an excellent director.
Mm.
Here, he captures both the strangeness of the concept and its emotional implications. His camera makes the impressively weird production design seem even more unnerving, and he gets fascinating, nuanced performances for an all around stellar ensemble. His visual palette is extraordinarily cold and intimidating and eerily colorless to reflect the mood and tone of this dry and dreary world. The real world passages, when we do go outside to the real world, are good also, because we follow Alti Mark, who is a glum, sad sack that eventually gets involved with people who claim to have found a way to undo the severance process. Eventually, though, what we see of Mark and others at home helps inform what's happening to their work selves in ways that are at times shocking and at others darkly funny.
Mhm.
Alti Mark, for instance, has little patience for his brother in law, who is a pretentious self help author. But when a copy of his brother in law's newest book makes its way down into the office, Inni Mark, who keep in mind has no memories of the outside, has no pop cultural understanding of any kind, finds this self help book, which is very, very lame. He finds it to be so profound, he begins memorizing passages out of it. But it's in the innie scenes where the show really shines. The innie scenes are so surprising and poignant that, unlike Helly, you made me giddy at the chance to spend tons of time
Mhm.
in this funhouse mirror of inadequate workplace incentives.
Yeah.
Like when one worker boasts of all the erasers and stickers he's earned. It's a bit bizarre, but also true to life, because if you've ever been in any sort of corporate structure or corporate setting,
Mhm.
you know that there are those Fridays where your boss buys you pizza and makes you think that this is a family, this is enough for what you give to the company. It's that the series continually finds both nightmarish new depths and unexpectedly sweet highs within this bizarre concept that makes it shine so bright. For example, a worker Irving, played by John Turturro, and a colleague in another department, played by the great Christopher Walken, develop romantic feelings for one another. But what can you do about it
Yeah.
when the versions who are in love never get to do anything but work, and the versions outside don't know each other? The incredibly brief moments they're able to steal away just to talk or to brush hands are just aching with emotions. And this is like the C or D plot. The Innies, in addition, are forbidden to communicate with their Alties. They can't send each other messages.
Mhm.
But occasionally, the companies allow for Alties to communicate with the Innies. So it's a one-way street.
Yeah.
Alties can communicate with Innies cannot communicate outside.
Yeah.
When one particular Innie stirs up trouble in search of better working conditions, their indignant outie records a video message laying things out bluntly.
Mhm.
I am a person, you are not. It's perhaps not a coincidence that the Innie scenes feel far livelier and more engaging than the outie ones, as the Severance is rebutting this very argument by showing just how human the Innies are, while their outies have coldly given up a part of themselves in service to their work.
Mhm.
The whole thing built in very satisfying ways, up through a season finale that is so tense that I may have forgotten to breathe a few
Oh
times
shit.
and left me both, I mean, angry, and I don't mean angry in a bad way, but I mean angry in a good way because of the various cliffhangers that they left us on.
Mhm.
Cliffhangers are a good thing, guys. It's a it's a sign of great writing when it makes you frustrated. So yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 for me. Easily the tied for best new show of
Oh.
the new year. Station 11 and this. Station 11, I can't even really consider it to be a 2022 show, considering its first couple of episodes debuted in 2021 in December.
Mhm.
So, I mean, Station 11 is mostly in 2022, but technically it's the 2021 show.
Yeah.
So I guess I could say that Severance is the best new show of the year. Right up there in quality with Station 11.
Nice.
10 out of 10, highly recommended. If you have Apple TV Plus, please go check it out. It's 9 episodes of pure perfection. Next up, I'll be covering a movie called Memoria, which is out right now at the projector,
Mhm.
thanks to Anticipate Pictures. This is made by Thai filmmaker. I'm gonna butcher his name, but I'm gonna try it one time,
Okay.
and then I'll just call him the Thai filmmaker from now on. Apichatpong Weerasethakul
Mhm.
um, is known in the art house world as the king of slow cinema. His films like 2010's Uncle Boonmi are typically very slow and static, feeling like a series of impressionist paintings that may not necessarily form a story, but coalesces to evoke some particularly deep, indescribable emotions within you. His works are lyrical and meditative and sinuous, often exploring the concept of dreams and memory and nature,
Mhm.
and they are extraordinarily long. His shortest film is 2.5 hours. His longest film is 3.5 hours.
Ooh.
So immediately, based on what I told you of the Thai filmmaker and his works, there is admittedly a high bar to entry here.
Yeah.
I am going to say this with straight up: his films are not for everyone. What I've just described to you, meditative and sinuous and lyrical, and all those nice words that I've just used, for many of you, you may equate that to boring, and I do not blame you,
Mm.
because sure, yeah, I mean, some of you may find it boring, but for fans like me who have come to appreciate his kind of lingering, beautiful, static compositions and the thoughts and feelings that it can evoke, his latest film, Memoria, is pretty much his masterpiece, his magnum opus. Memoria is the Thai director's first work outside of Thailand.
Mhm.
It follows Jessica, who's played by Tilda Swinton, who is an expat English woman living in Medellin, Colombia, where she operates a flower selling business. She is visiting her sister Karen, who is in Bogota hospital, suffering from a mysterious respiratory ailment. One early morning, Jessica is awoken by a mysterious thud. She just sees a thud out of nowhere. It sounds like nothing. It sounds random. The sound is dull
Mhm.
and sharp, and it doesn't have a clear sense of origin. And Jessica soon discovers that she keeps hearing this clunk randomly at different sporadic points in her life, and no one else can hear it. And Jessica searches for the meaning behind this foreboding sound. And in her search for meaning, Momora becomes a glacial, mesmerizing, 136-minute sort of sci-fi fantasy that's filled with supernatural terror and a deep psychological exploration connected to the human consciousness.
Interesting.
Memoria operates on a very eerie level. The sharp thuds arrive without notice, occasionally one at a time, other times it's in a succession.
Uh-huh.
Jessica eventually goes to a young, flirtatious recording engineer named Hernan to replicate the sound. And she goes to this recording studio and she tries to tell him what it sounds like. So he's going to replicate it for her. And it's deep and low and metallic, as though it's sprung from the center of the earth,
Mhm.
like a molten rock landing on the ground. And the film is a feast of a sonic landscape, not just because of the fact it focused on all sorts of sounds. The rattle of the wind between the leaves even seems to have its own language. And Momora is populated by many instances of other distinctive noises, whether it's the crack of thunder or the screech of howler monkeys. In his typically unhurried style, the Thai director asks us to contemplate all of these oral sensations and consider how they may form the unexamined background of our lives. A subplot in the narrative includes construction workers uncovering an ancient skeleton of a girl with a hole drilled into her skull to release demons. Likewise, Jessica is diagnosed with exploding head syndrome, weirdly
Mm.
enough. And the Thai director isn't too concerned with the mechanics of either phenomena. He takes greater interest in demonstrating how Colombia has moved away from its supernatural indigenous roots to become a more modern country,
Yeah.
and the ways a white woman transversing that foreign ground can be consumed by echoes uh, of a lost culture, the ghosts of a lost culture, if I could say so. So there's very little dialogue, and Tilda Swinton has to convey her growing tension and apprehension through subtle physical acting.
Mm.
As you may have already guessed, Tilda Swinton is a great actress, so she pulls this off brilliantly. The shots are also long and measured, and it feels like there are only a few dozen cuts in the movie. That pace allows viewers to search the screen for meaning, just as Jessica is searching for the origin of the noise. And I know from experience that 99% of you will give this a 0 out of 10 because it is so slow. Nothing is happening, you would say. But for the niche who've learned to appreciate Weirasatakul's cryptic Zen-like impressionistic works,
Mhm.
I think this one will be a treat. This is for you people who perhaps would like to go to a museum and spend an hour or two staring at a painting. Um, it's for some people, it's for not, but for me, it's an 8.5 out of 10. That's for me, lah. Me, the art house film buff who has kind of cultivated this palette over years. Me, the casual viewer from 10 years ago or 15 years ago, whatever that may be, would have rated this a 0. And I understand if you hate this, so I'm not going to blame you if you do. And that's it for Quick Hits Part 1. Next up, we'll be delving into Russian Doll Season 2, which is finally back
Let's
after
go.
a 3.5 year hiatus. If you slept on the first season of Netflix's Russian Doll, you missed a wonderfully dark and quirky and poignant comedy about a woman named Nadia who discovers that she's in a time loop where she keeps dying but then returning to the night of a birthday party. We gave the Natasha Leon series a glowing review 3.5 years ago on this very podcast.
Hmm.
If you've forgotten, season one revealed that Nadia's fate was tied to a stranger named Alan who was stuck in his own separate time loop, constantly reliving the day he tried to propose to his girlfriend only to discover that she was having an affair. Eventually, time began to break down as they tried to figure out what was causing them to loop. As fun as that was, season two has much bigger plans in store than a simple time loop.
Mm.
It is set 4 years later in present time, and Russian Doll season two finds Nadia and Alan literally time traveling into their pasts through an unexpected portal located in the New York City subway.
Yep.
At first, they experienced this as a kind of ever expanding, era spanning, intergenerational adventure, but they soon discover that it's much more serious if they attempt to change things. Particularly, much of the season concerns Nadia's quest for a treasure stolen from her Hungarian Jewish ancestors in World War II by the Nazis. That is the bare bones plot of season two without giving the spoilers away. I'll talk much broader about its themes and emotional content later on without giving away the details of it. But for now, what do you think of season two, Isa?
First and foremost, I fucking love the playlist that they have for season two.
Of course,
I have
yes,
been
yeah.
listening to a ton of they actually I think I can't remember who did the playlist up, but I've been listening to it on Spotify. I've also been listening to a ton of the Bachi mode since finishing Russian Dolls. What
Mm,
is there to say about Russian Doll season two? It's ambitious, uh, to varying effect. I feel. Did
mm,
I enjoy it? Yes, I did. Was it satisfying in the end? I'm still not sure, and I've been done with it for a couple of weeks now. Um,
mm,
there are things that are extremely compelling. I think the general premise of season two is fascinating, right? Like this entire idea of kind of traveling back. I do enjoy the performances of the additional cast members who have joined in season two. Chloe Sevigny in particular, I think does an excellent job as playing a young her young mother, or the younger
yes.
version of her mother. Uh,
She was in season one as well.
yes, yes. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I've really kind of enjoyed that. I don't think, and this is something you pointed out to me before I started watching season two, and I
Mm-hmm.
agree. It's not as neat as season one.
Yeah.
It's very much expanded past the original premise that we get in season one, and this version of time traveling is just a much bigger loop, right? In essence, like the way that they're going about it, without giving too much
Mm,
away. And
yeah.
with that additional scope, with that additional complexity, there are moments in time where it feels difficult to have the dots connect as nicely as it is in season one, and that can be
Yeah.
frustrating at times. But outside
Yeah.
of that, it's still fairly feel good. I think the pacing struggles in parts, but overall
Mm-hmm.
is still okay. And like, I mean, we're just here to watch what she gets up to, really, right? They banked on
Yep.
that, and it has paid off. And overall, it was a really fun ride.
Yes, yes. I agree with you there. Yeah, I have some similar thoughts because as you already mentioned, we kind of discussed this outside lah.
Yeah,
I think Natasha Leone and company made the smart decision to treat Nadia and Ellen as kind of veterans of this kind of supernatural
yeah,
experience because they don't really stop to question what is happening or how.
yeah,
They just accept it. One of Nadia's long dead relatives tells her there are things in life that cannot be explained. Full stop. That's it.
yeah,
Um, and there are things simply better off not being explained in shows like this one, especially when in other shows or sci-fi fantasy shows where you spend kind of half an episode where people sit around explaining powers and magic and technomebel. It's frequently the most boring part of such shows or movies.
yes,
It's more entertaining just to accept it and enjoy Nadia being Nadia, who is such a comic force of nature.
hmm,
And as was the case last time, the show is definitely using its science fiction trappings to explore much more grounded emotional issues. It's not interested in the logic of time travel as much as the logic of your emotional past or your generational trauma.
yeah,
The time travel functions as a metaphor for, among other things, the mental illness that runs through Nadia's family and her fear that she could have inherited her mother's schizophrenia. Plus, much of the show's comedy, and it is still very funny,
yes,
works as a release valve for many of the problems Nadia is reluctant to face about herself. And the new episodes repeatedly confront her with that darkness in powerful ways. And
hmm,
the things that Nadia wants to fix about herself require much more than a cross era treasure hunt.
yeah,
But hey, it's a blast to watch her try,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, overall, season two is not the near perfect triumph that season one was,
yeah,
but in reaching further and in trying more, season two ultimately justifies its existence. Where once it was hard to see how a continuation might work, now it wouldn't feel the least bit surprising for Nadia to say, be abducted by aliens or go to parallel
yeah,
dimensions. Nadia, the character, is so fun to watch that you stick her in any random metaphysical conundrum, and they're banking
hmm,
that if an audience will be in. There are occasional moments that feel like Natasha Lyonne is kind of just playing the hits. In the opening scene of the show, Nadia says "cockroach" with her, or her saying random wry witty things with her gravelly voice and the phone book thick New York accent and her chain smoking and posture and impulsiveness and curly red hair and sunglasses are such a vibe.
hmm, hmm,
They're counting on you to just be in for that vibe.
yeah,
And I think truthfully Russian Doll is that vibe
yes,
much more than anything else. And even hits like literal hits like Harry Nilsson's Gotta Get Up eventually finds its way into the soundtrack again.
yes,
But I think season two also proves that it's not a rehash of season one. The tone is similar, but the gimmick is very different, and in many ways, it is more audacious in scope and
hmm,
themes. And if the end result is a lot messier than the 2018 edition, the level of ambition and the pleasure of going back in Nadia's company
yeah,
makes up for it.
hmm,
I would rather have a messy, more audacious attempts at trying something new
yes,
than what most shows do in just trying to replicate what worked in season one, just doing the same thing over and over again. Lah. Most shows, and I could tell you there are a lot of shows that we reviewed here. There's season two, three, four. I just trying to recapture the magic of season one.
uh-huh.
Those are the shows that are stuck in a time loop. And Natasha Leone and Nadia have broken out of a time loop and have tried to give us something different. Is it messier?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's still fun because they don't try the same thing.
Hmm, hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So question, what do you feel about Ellen's kind of arc, right, in season two? Because for me it felt a little anemic, unfortunately, right? But
Mm.
given the expanded scope of things and just like how much stuff is going on with Nadia, I understand that. But at the same time, a part of me either wanted more from his arc, uh, just in terms of like screen time with him, really, or
Yeah.
I feel like it could have not in season one, Alan acts as a counterpoint, right? To Nadia and what she's going through is a different perspective with his own struggles. You don't
Yeah.
really see that here in season two, and I feel like if we had done away with his arc altogether and focused completely on Nadia, it would have worked
Mm.
to similar effect. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. In response to your question, what arc? It did not exist.
Yeah.
Ellen was there because they signed the actor.
Yeah.
And I guess they had to use him. Probably the biggest flaw of season two was that Alan was there when he didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
And that's about it. Yeah, that is probably the biggest flaw in season two. It
Mm,
would have worked without Alan. In fact, it would have worked better without
I
Alan.
think so too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I'm rating this a 7 out of 10, which is way below the I think the 8 I gave season one.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10 as well. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
so many things to enjoy. Still strong recommend. Just like with the ambition and the expanded scope and the inevitable messiness of that, like, just there were just bound to be more things to kind of pick on, right? Given how tight season one was, so 7 out of 10.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Next up, we're delving into one of the more genuinely eccentric Netflix animes in recent memory, which is Thermae Novae. The series is actually the third screen adaptation of the popular Thermae manga series,
Yeah,
literally meaning Roman bathhouse in Latin. Thermae follows Lucius, who is a bathhouse architect under the reign of Emperor Hadrian, and he struggles to come up with innovative ideas to be competitive in a saturated bathhouse market back in ancient Rome. And luckily, Lucius is inexplicably able to gain inspiration through bizarre incidents where he sinks deep underwater only to inexplicably reappear in modern day Japan, where he discovers 21st century bathing innovations
yeah,
such as private toilets, outdoor hot springs, shower heads, and he explores modern Japanese bathhouses as well. Um, Much like Russian Doll season two, I think Tamir Romi Nove wisely also doesn't bother to explain the mechanics of this time travel.
yeah,
It just puts you in it.
yeah.
What do you think?
Oh man. Before kind of embarking of it, I took a quick kind of flip through the manga, right? I was just like, what in the
Mm.
world is going on with it? And as much as the manga is a lot. The way the manga is kind of drawn and kind of paced is a lot shorter than what we get in the
Mm.
anime. The anime kind of plays it out a tad more, which is great. Um, I'm totally fine with the fact that you don't explain how it exactly works. I did admittedly get a little tired of him just like having random reasons to fall into deep water.
Mm-hmm.
That got tiring after a while, but you just kind of accept it as just kind of like, okay, it's a thing, it's a gag, right? Just like lean into it with all of
Yep.
that. The incredible exchanges and experiences that Lucius has with modern Japanese people is absolutely a joy to watch. The exchanges are
Mm.
funny. There is so much miscommunication that transpires just from like not just a language level, but like a whole like cultural and generational level as well. That is fascinating to kind of see play out, right? Like it's hard sometimes, and I think a lot of the time when we have isekai um anime, right, and as tropey as all of those get, a lot of the time like the protagonists tend to adapt to whatever new world they find themselves in very very quickly. But because Lucius goes
Mm.
to and fro so often and his time in Japan is much shorter obviously than the time that he spends in Rome, um
Yes.
that continues to be his misunderstanding of his ability to time travel, and I guess be in a completely different space is fascinating to kind of like track, right? Like as it goes along through the entire season, right? Like he has
Mm.
a a begrudging respect for the technology and culture surrounding Japanese baths, and it grows on him instead of something that he immediately just like attaches himself to. He's still extremely proud as a Roman citizen, and continues
Mm.
to carry himself that way, which leads to both some very interesting kind of like philosophical quandaries as well as incredible hijinks at the same time, which is incredibly
Mm.
fun to watch. Um, for those of you who are keen on checking this out, fair warning, there will be a lot of tasteful Greek statuesque nudity, a lot.
Sure.
Like in every
Sure.
episode, like 80% of the episode is going to be something like that. Lucius is mostly unclothed for the majority of this anime. And it's
Mm.
not something that's a turn off. And it's very, very apt for what the anime actually is. But just a
Yeah.
fair warning if that's not your cup of tea.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree with all that you said. Um, I think, yeah, this narrow scope that Romae is,
Yeah.
right, like this episodic running gag is meant to be really fun. As you know, we not only see why bathing culture is so important both to ancient Rome and modern
Yeah.
Japan, but like you said, like how Lucius, who is a proud Roman, slowly begins to respect the culture and manners and ingenuity of the Japanese people.
Hmm.
It is fascinating not just as a treatise about bathhouse engineering,
Yeah.
but also how to be a good tourist,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
This is reinforced with the fact that manga author Mari Yamazaki herself provides increasingly convincing arguments for why Japanese bathhouse tours are a great time.
Mm.
In fact, the best part of each episode is arguably the documentary travelogue episodes that happen at the end of each episode, the mini epilogues at the end of each episode, as we follow Mari Yamazaki touring various bathhouses in Japan
Yeah.
and learning about the various techniques and local customs employed in different spas and hot
Yeah.
springs. It's a show within a show that I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. Um, it is an increasingly, it's not an increasingly popular, like that kind of format has existed for quite a while. The last show that I watched that had a similar kind of theme to that was not a restaurant to another world, but some kind of isekai restaurant show as well, which I really kind of
Mm,
enjoyed. I do enjoy the fact that like we get to see the source of the author's inspiration as she does this tour of like various um meccas, I guess, of Japanese bath culture, and
yep,
how
yep,
that
yep.
feeds directly into her stories with Lucius. Those are interesting and a peek into a process that is usually not available to us as anime watchers because we are several times removed from the manga itself and the process of creation of the story there. So I
I agree.
fully
Yeah.
enjoy those things. Yeah, I really, really love this anime. I did go and check out the older ones. They are not great. And they don't seem, I mean, they're fairly old and they don't seem to be able to capture just the absurdity of the premise of the story in the same way that this new one has.
Okay.
So give it a shot. It's on Netflix for most of
Yep.
us. And
Yep.
I'm going to give it a solid like 7 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed this.
I agree. Yeah, 7 out of 10 for me as well. Next up is part two of Quick Hits, where again I talk about some of the movies, mostly movies this time that my co-hosts haven't
Hmm.
seen. There are a lot of blockbusters out in cinema right now. Now that COVID restrictions have been, lightened. First up, I'm going to talk about is Fantastic Beasts 3, subtitled The Secrets of Dumbledore. If you thought Fantastic Beasts was the Hobbit of the Harry Potter cinematic franchise, well, the third entry proves that it is far, far worse.
uh,
Um, Even worse than a novella being stretched into 9 hours, which is bad in itself.
yeah.
Fantastic Beasts is a franchise that is at the mercy of slapdash planning, cobbled together not even from a book or a story, but from various pieces of encyclopedia material from the Wizarding World. A visited outing entitled The Secrets of Dumbledore falls precisely into the same traps as its predecessors, offering up an unwieldy mash of adult themes and childish whimsy that's made even more inscrutable by too many subplots, too many characters, and a tone that veers wildly off course at every possible turn. A horrendous mess. It is a 2 out of 10.
Ooh.
Next up, I'm going to be talking about the sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The sequel follows Sonic as he settles in Green Hills. Sonic is eager to prove that he has what it takes to be a true hero. His test comes when Dr. Robotnik returns, this time with a new partner, Knuckles, in
Hmm.
search for an emerald that has the power to destroy civilization. So Sonic teams up with his own sidekick, Tails, and they together embark on a globe-trotting journey to find the emerald before it falls into the wrong hands. From a technical standpoint, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is fairly impressive in merging its live action and animation,
Hmm.
a reminder of the technological advancements since the days of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is filled with frantic action that will appeal to family audiences seeking a distraction.
Yeah.
However, it's nothing more than a generic popcorn fodder that's a little too generic, a little too forgettable, and a little too overlong. It all sort of comes together in the end, though. But there's no earthly reason this kind of substanceless adventure should take 2 hours. probably be better served as a 90-minute feature. It's a 5 out of 10 for me.
Mm.
Next up, I'm going to talk about a new show out now on Showtime. It's called The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it sounds familiar, it's because The Man Who Fell to Earth was originally a 1963 sci-fi novel by Walter Travis,
Yeah.
and has since been adapted twice before, with the 1976 Nicholas Roeg feature film starring David Bowie, the most famous adaptation, and then there's a TV movie in 1987. So it's been about 30, 40 years, so the time seems about right for a reboot
Mm-hmm.
that retains the premise of the basic framework of the source material, but shifts the focus to a new character and
Okay.
takes a decidedly lighter and sometimes comedic approach to the storyline. This in particular is a reboot of the Nicholas Roeg film, that version.
Oh. Right.
Yes,
Right. Okay. Okay. Okay.
but because of that, it's unfortunately that you have to compare it to that version now, because this is a reboot of that version. But who could possibly be better than David Bowie?
Yeah.
Like David Bowie's remarkable alien quality, who can replicate that?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, David Bowie is no longer alive, so what you gonna do lah? uh
Well.
the premise is similar to the source material. This time, a new alien played by Chitwa Ejiofor, who does a good job here.
Mm-hmm.
He's no boy, but he does a great job. He crashes into Earth in New Mexico, stumbling his way to a civilization nearby. He mimics those he sees and hears, and calls himself Faraday. So he comes to Earth with orders to contact a single mother named Justine Falls.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is because he believes that that this mother is the key not only to saving his planet but to saving Earth in the process.
Mm-hmm.
How does Faraday know this? That's because of Thomas Jerome Newton. Fans of the original are probably pausing here because yes, Jerome Newton is David Bowie's character in the film.
Mm.
So this is not a reboot; it is a sequel
Oh.
to the Man Who Fell to Earth movie. So it's a sequel slash reboot. In the 4 episodes I've seen, the Man Who Fell to Earth is at least 2 or 3 somewhat different shows. There's a kind of tonal whiplash here that can be perplexing.
Okay.
But thus far, a great performance by Chitwa Ejiofor holds the series together in ways that can remain entertaining, and it feels it's full of potential. Overall, it's solidly made. It's issue oriented. It's kind of a sci-fi road trip about heavy topics like immigration. It's not a mind-blowing type of show, but it's not at all a waste of time. So it's a 7 out of 10. Next up, we're going to be talking about Shining Girls, which stars Elizabeth Moss.
Mm.
Which is why I watched it. I watched it because it's Elizabeth
Yeah.
Moss. Knowing it's Elizabeth Moss, you may be wondering who is menacing Elizabeth Moss this time. Um, the actors' characters have withstood, as we've talked about, 1960s corporate sexism,
Yeah.
a theo-fascist patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
even a freaking invisible abusive ex.
Mm-hmm.
Moss's latest project aims to leave those sufferings in the dust. This 8-part Apple TV show, she plays Kirby Masrachi, who is an assault survivor
Mm-hmm.
who teams with a reporter to hunt down a serial killer. That's because the MO of the serial killer resembles the circumstances of her own attack years ago, the attack that she survived.
Yeah.
So she thinks that she was attacked by this serial killer. It plays exactly like Zodiac,
Okay.
up until the point that you realize the serial killer is a time traveler
Huh? Okay.
and that he's already killed her in the future. The conceit layers different genres like newspaper procedural, sci-fi, and trauma drama, with clues scattered and juggled to keep us guessing over 6.5 hours. The thing is, the show is pretty solid, pretty solid. Elizabeth Moss is great as always, but
Yeah.
in the end, I can't help but feel that you'd be better off watching Zodiac
Okay.
or watching Predestination instead, because
Interesting.
those are the 2 movies that this show is particularly inspired by.
Right.
It's a 7 out of 10, but it will play better if you've never seen Zodiac or Predestination and think this is very novel.
I see. I see.
And yeah, that was Quick Hits 2. That was my rundown of all the shows. Next up, let's talk about Morbius, the latest movie coming out of Sony's corner of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Or should I say Marvel Cinematic Multiverse?
Yes.
We caught Morbius about a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
What do you think of Morbius?
Okay. It is not the worst movie Sony has put out. Right?
Sure, yeah.
And I'm just gonna say that out loud just because like it seems that there are a ton of memes going on about like, oh, it's the worst thing they ever made. It's not, right? Like it's okay.
It's very bad.
It,
It's very
yeah,
bad.
it's okay. It's like it's fine, right? Like it is everything that you thought it would possibly be, and if you're going this with the correct expectations, you're going to get exactly that, right?
Mm,
Jared Leto yet again is insufferable. In yet again another insufferable role. But Matt
mm,
Smith, I really kind of enjoyed Milo slash Lucian's character. It's
mm,
it's so oddly apt, the
mm.
casting choice. And
Yep.
as I was saying to Hids, as we came out of the movie, I was just like, it's so strange that Matt Smith is coming here and he's playing like a vampire, and it's kind of like fairly modern New York that we're going through, but he dresses exactly like Doctor Who, his Doctor Who character, which is
Sure. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is kind of amazing and so strange at the same time. But you know, I personally am a much bigger fan of the Mobius that we got in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, the one with the strange
Mm.
suckers on the palms of his hand.
Yep.
In his very kind of like short stint within that franchise, he had a much
Mm.
more fascinating arc, much more interesting origin story that is not so like kind of run of the mill sci-fi vampire.
I
And
agree.
his
Yeah.
relationships in that were with both Peter and with Blade and with Craven was far far more interesting than anything we got here. So I don't want to spend too much
Mm.
time on Morbius, but like, what do you what's your take?
Ditto. Uh,
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna give it like a 5 out of 10. I think like it's a movie that you can watch if you just want to like round out your general knowledge of what Sony is trying to do. But
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
nothing outstanding about this movie at all.
I agree. I agree. Next up, you've seen Ultraman season 2 as well, right? The anime version of
Yes.
Ultraman.
So I've caught 3 episodes, which is exactly half of the season
Mm.
for that. It has been on a very, very long hiatus. And after seeing 3 episodes, I kind of understand why. It is completely computer generated, right? And so was the first season. In
Yep.
that amount of time, technology has definitely improved. Like we've gotten an entirely new generation of graphics cards, and all of that. And that certainly does show in the quality in
Mm.
general. But yet again, we
Mm.
come back to this thing that for both Hits and I, we're not big fans of cell shading animation, right? Like for me, if you are going to go full on CG, then embrace that medium and stop pretending it's anime. Uh,
Mm.
so much so that most of the action sequences, and I'll get into the story and plot, of which there's very little, um,
Right.
that do not involve any cell shaded characters. So that means when he's in his suit, right, looks great,
Ah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The monster designs this time round don't seem as novel or interesting as what we got the last time round. This time round,
Right.
we follow. There's some complications. There's a new mystery, a new kind of like alien related conspiracy and crime that needs to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
There's an obviously you have to pop in a new Ultraman because everybody just wants to collect more Ultraman. Clearly, but outside of that, there's actually very little to kind of go on. It feels very much like a continuation of the last one, which we didn't rate that highly anyway. But if you're a
Mm.
huge, huge Ultraman fan, like there is still a great deal of kind of like the nostalgia. There's less emphasis on kind of the family drama that we got in season one, which I thought was maybe the most compelling part about it. But
Mm.
you don't really get that in season two. It feels a lot more bland because of that, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yep.
And just a lot of like, sci-fi hoopla that they banter and throw around that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yep.
It's 6 episodes. It's like 20 minutes each. It's a really short watch, but I couldn't even get through half of it. So take that for what you will. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10.
Okay, cool. That essentially wraps it up for the main episode of Journal Quality 53. I'm gonna wrap it up with the pull list as I usually do, where I recommend a book or a comic or some sort of literature that my co-host or you may not have read. This one, I'm willing to bet there's a decent chance you've read this.
Mm.
I'll be talking about Never Let Me Go, which was initially a film I saw in 2010,
Mhm.
which I thought was good, but largely unspecial. I have heard that the book by Nobel laureate Kazuo Ishiguro is a straight up alt history, character driven sci fi masterpiece,
Yeah.
much in the vein of a Margaret Atwood type of literature.
Mm.
Well, I finally read the novel, and I just got to say, the movie, I think, does the novel no justice. The movie was good, but it was no masterpiece like the novel
Yeah.
is. It's an interesting hybrid of, I would say, Blade Runner crossed with normal people. Um, we f- we follow a narrator named Kathy who is looking back on her school days at a superficially idyllic establishment called Helisham.
Yeah.
And Hilsham is it exists to raise clone children who have been brought into the world for the sole purpose of providing organs to other normal people, uncloned people.
Mhm.
They don't have parents, they can't have children, and once they graduate, they go through a period of being carers to others of their kind who are already being deprived of their organs. Then they undergo up to 4 donations themselves, quote unquote donations, until they complete, aka die. The whole enterprise, like most human enterprises of dubious morality, is wrapped in euphemism and shadow. The outer world to these children um, exists because it's, you know, like the world just wants these kids to exist because they're greedy, right?
Yeah.
Greedy for the benefits that they can confer. But it doesn't want to look head on at what is happening.
Mm.
We assume that we assume, but it's never stated that whatever objections might have been raised to such a scheme have already been overcome.
Yeah.
By now, the rules are in place and the situation is taken for granted. And you might think, how could people do this to other people? We live in a world where slavery was a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it was once a thing, and it wasn't thought of as a bad thing. Uh, and by the beneficiaries and victims alike, it was thought of as the status quo. It was just normal. It was so normalized that you didn't think twice about it. That's what the world of cloning is like. This it's just normalized. But all of that, the politics of it is background though. Ishiguro isn't interested in the practicalities of cloning and organ donation, nor is it a novel about future horrors.
Mhm.
It's set in the past. It's set in an alternate version of 1990s England that's exactly like it was, except with human cloning.
Mm.
And Kathy has nothing to say. Our main character has nothing to say about the unfairness of her fate because she's not been raised to think that way.
Yeah.
She's not a radical, she's not a rebel. She's like all of us who have come to accept the limitations society imposes on us, and it's just normal. It's normal to her. Indeed, she considers herself lucky to have grown up in a superior establishment like Hailsham rather than the standard organ farm.
Mhm.
Like most people, she's interested in personal relationships. In her case, the connection between her best friend, who is a bossy and manipulative person called Ruth, and the boy she loves named Tommy. So it follows them over a couple of decades of interaction. Um, Kathy and Tommy gain minor clues about their future and deal with Ruth's manipulations, but avoid direct confrontations, even when openly faced with destructive lies.
Yeah.
This opens up the path to a life full of unexpressed thoughts and painful misunderstandings. This book is very good at crafting the interior lives of these characters and is so uncannily observant and emotionally truthful about how kids think and interact. It's just the setting is sci-fi. The character motivations are not. Sometimes you let yourself think that you're reading a Sally Rooney novel or an Elena Ferrante novel.
Mhm.
I compare this a lot to Normal People or My Brilliant Friend because it's very similar in tone and style. It all feels so embarrassingly familiar and honest and compelling to anyone who's ever kept a teenage diary. It's a bit Pen 15 too, to be honest.
Yeah.
And most people will complain that the book focuses too much on the personal lives of these characters. Um, and offers very little detail about the cloning system or the world at large. There's no rebellion.
Mhm.
Heck, the kids don't even think they're oppressed. But in my opinion, it's a deep dive into them as people that makes the book so heartbreaking and intimate. These clones are not some abstract allegory for real world problems, and they
Mhm.
are not YA heroes. They feel like real people with real lives, and that's the point.
Mhm.
The point is that every forgotten minority are real people with real lives who think and feel in exactly the same way as we all do, with the same friendship and relationship problems and all that jazz, you know. Each of us knows injustice exists in our world, but none of us think seriously about it. Or none of us think about overturning the world order. Do you or I think about that? Sometimes, but we don't actually consider it a practicality. We've bought into the rules of our world, and so have they. In one sense, Never Let Me Go is a mystery novel with the question of the character's purpose and future hanging constantly in the air. But
Mhm.
the clues are all in place, and the mystery is easy to unravel. The book isn't meant as a thriller with a big high impact reveal. It's far more like one of Margaret Atwood's novels with a gentle twist and a mildly fantastical bent, giving extra shape to what's more properly a subtle, moving story about people and their emotions and how they express them and why they don't, and all that gets lost as a result. It's a thoughtful, crafty, and finally very disquieting look at the effects of dehumanization on any group that it's subject to.
Mhm.
And in Ishiguro's subtle hands, these effects are far from obvious. There's no them bad, us good preaching. Rather, there's the creeping, uncertain feeling that emerges as the expectations of characters diminish and their ability to think outside the box decreases.
Mhm.
The reader reaches the end of the book wondering exactly where the walls of his or her own invisible box begins and ends. And yeah, that's what I took from the novel. It's brilliant. It's not at all what the movie is. I would highly recommend it. I mean, it won a Booker Prize. It's written by a Nobel laureate, so I my praise means little compared to all of that, lah. And I'm assuming if you're a sci-fi fan, you've probably read this soft sci-fi novel at least once, you know. But I haven't, and I enjoyed it when I read it back in February. Have you seen the movie or read the novel,
I have
Isa?
seen the movie. I
Yep.
don't know. I have not read the novel. It's one of the Ishiguro novels that I have not finished.
Mm.
Yeah. It is definitely. I mean, I put it on my list as soon as I saw you put it out on pull list. I was like, oh yes, that's actually
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
I haven't done that yet, so it's just good to know that it is better than the movie, which I was okay with all those years ago.
Mm.
But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, completely concur that it will definitely be probably better than what we got on screen.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah. That's it for this episode of Genre Equality 53. We'll be back next month for a couple of episodes of Behold. One with Isa and one with Hadi as well. Firstly, on Behold 48, we look forward to boxing movies. That's what me and
Mm.
Hadi are going to be talking about. We're talking about our favorite boxing films,
Yeah.
including Raging Bull, Million Dollar Baby, Rocky and Creed, which were both from the same franchise. And then later on Behold 49, we'll be interviewing the creator of another podcast, a narrative audio historical drama called The Masnaro and the Palawan.
Mm-hmm.
He was the creator, writer, star, producer, all around everything
Yeah.
to that narrative podcast. He is called Lian Sutton, and we have a close to hour long interview with him. And then subsequently, we'll also be talking about some of our other favorite narrative podcasts or audio dramas that have come out in recent times.
Mm.
Um, Isa has picked Welcome to Night Vale, and I have picked My Dad Wrote a Porno. And next month for Genre Equality, probably the biggest of the year so far.
Yeah.
Because MCU will be wrapping two big things, one a TV show, one a movie. We'll be talking about Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness,
Mm.
alongside Moon Knight, which has its finale next week. Myself and Hardy will be delving into Undone Season 2, which is as good as Undone Season 1. Hardy will talk about Halo because he is, but I don't know, he likes suffering.
Yeah.
Um, Plus, I will talk about Stranger Things season 4, which is the final season of Stranger
Yep.
Things, Love, Death, and Robots season 3, as well as a new horror movie called X, which A24 is releasing. Hardy will also be reviewing Star Trek Picard because, again, like I said, he enjoys suffering. And I'll be introducing um, a new segment for genre equality called Quick Hits Classics,
Oh.
which is a segment where I don't have a book or piece of literature to review, and I will be revisiting a sci-fi, fantasy, or horror title that we've never talked about on the show before.
Yeah.
So Quick Hits Classics for next month will be a certified cult
Oh
classic
yeah.
in a horror realm by Roman Polanski. It's called Rosemary's Baby. It's a movie I consider to be my personal favorite horror movie of that ilk, of that type of horror movie. You
Yeah.
know, the satanic cult it's a certain genre. I don't know what to call that genre, but I believe this is the best of that of all the stories. It has come to influence a lot of Ari Aster and Robert Eggers's work in recent years. There would be no A24 without Rosemary's Baby, and
Yep.
I'll get into that next month. What are you most looking forward to covering?
I guess Doctor Strange and Moon Knight would definitely be the big ones.
Mm.
Going through Moon Knight, I'm enjoying it so far.
Yep.
I'll keep whatever discussion we have for the episode itself. For
Mm-hmm.
sure. I am curious about Love, Death, and Robots, season 3.
Yep.
Just to see where they go with it, right? Because like as we've seen so far, there's always some that really, really stand out. Season 2, on the whole, wasn't as captivating as season 1, so I'm curious. I'm just curious to see. Like every time we
Mm.
get like a year or 2 year gap between seasons, there's a huge jump in the quality of the animation, and I'm always, always interested to see how people make use of tech to, just kind of like create new worlds. So I'm super excited about that as well.
I agree. I agree. Well, that's it for this episode of Genre Equality. Join us next month, and our 3 new episodes will be out then. Till then, this has been Hidzir.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye, guys.
Ciao.